So when I was a kid, my two favourite bands were Alice Cooper and KISS. And back then, I had no real conception of what a session musician was. I just assumed that those guys played all their own records. Of course, as I got a bit older, I realised that wasn't always the case. And I started to scan back through old album credits and spotting a few familiar names like Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and Steve Lukather. But one name that I didn't pay much attention to was Steve Farris. Now, Steve Farris was the lead guitar player in a band called Mr. from the 80s, but he was also a fairly prolific session guitar player at the time. In 1982, Steve was living in Los Angeles and pursuing a career as a hired gun, playing in a bunch of bands and for a bunch of different artists and on a bunch of different recording sessions. And one day he was approached after a show and asked if he wanted to audition for KISS because Ace Frehley was leaving the band. Steve put together a tape of his sessions, actually with Tony Peluso, who was the guitar player for the Carpenters, who did that iconic solo on Goodbye to Love. Anyway, Steve put together this tape and went to the office in LA, gave the lady the tape, and she listened to it in front of him with no reaction whatsoever. So Steve thought nothing of it, went back on with his day-to-day life. 2 weeks later, Steve got a call from Paul Stanley asking if he would like to come down and audition with the band at the Record Plant. Steve, of course, said yes, so got his stuff together, which was at the time a Valiant Stratocaster, I believe it was a Rivera modded Boss CE2, and a Goodrich volume pedal, and went down to the studios. He got there and saw two guys that he realised must be Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons, because at the time they were yet to unmask. And so he met the guys and they said, we're auditioning someone else at the moment. If you can go and wait outside for a bit, we'll call you in a bit. A bit turned into 3 hours of waiting. But eventually Steve was called in, plugged into a Marshall, and said, okay, we're gonna run you a new track we're working on, and we just want to hear what you do. So he queued up the track, said it's a 8-bar solo, it's in G, we'll punch you into the bridge, and off he went. That was it. First time hearing the track, and puts down a solo. So Paul and Gene are really excited and say, quick, give him another track. So Steve Farris gets a second take of this track that he's never heard before, and just as he finishes, Paul slams stop on the tape machine and says, will you dye your hair black? Followed shortly by, how do you feel about wearing high heels? Steve Farris responds, sure, I'll give it a shot. And he gets called back to the studio another 3 times or so to come and write and record with the band, and was this close to becoming an official member of KISS, and the only thing that stopped him was the ability to sing confidently. Steve got in a live rehearsal situation with the band, and they asked him to sing, and I believe that he did a version of Honky Tonk Woman with KISS backing him up. And after leaving, didn't hear from the band for a good 3 weeks, and then they came back and said, hey, we've gone with someone else. But what's incredible about this story is that second take that Steve Farris laid down, completely shooting from the hip off the top of his head in the audition, is the solo take that ends up on the Creatures of the Night record. That thing I played at the start, that was a second time pass, no punch-ins all the way through, second time hearing the track ever. And I thought that was the craziest and the coolest thing that I'd ever heard. So thank you, Tony Kennedy, for getting me onto Steve Farris and his amazing playing, and inspiring me to go and check out some of the stuff he'd done. I will be doing more on Steve Farris in the future for sure. And if you want to see a little bit about how I got this sound, I'm going to do a video on that on my Patreon, which there is a link to in the description below. I also do an additional lesson each month just for patrons, as well as I'm going to be hosting monthly Q&As, loads of gear stuff, loads of behind the scenes stuff, as well as tablature for the licks that I put out. So if you're enjoying what I'm doing and you want more of it, head over there and hopefully I'll see a few more of you. Okay guys, I'll see you next week. Take care.